Welcome to Scotland's largest town, a stone's throw from Glasgow. Historically, it was a Labour stronghold until the party's rout in Scotland in 2015, when the SNP had a spectacular win here. So with a general election looming, what are the preoccupations and passions of the people of Paisley, be it on domestic issues or defence, education or the environment? Young and older, rich and poor. Tonight, politicians and people from every major sector are gathered here to debate how they and Scotland are faring 25 years on from the opening of Scotland's Parliament. Good evening. Paisley became an economic powerhouse in the Industrial Revolution, at the forefront of the textile industry, home of the famous Paisley pattern and equally famous radicals. Now it's a university town with one of the UK's foremost logistic companies, a famous football team doing quite well, I'm told, and a vibrant art scene. People here, Paisley Buddies as they're called, are fiercely protective of their town, which was in danger of having the life sucked out of it by two massive out-of-town malls. But it's mounted a fight back. However, last year the town failed in its bid for £20 million from the Levelling Up Fund. So tonight, near Paisley at Scotland's National Manufacturing Institute, we have an array of guests to discuss the key issues for them as we head to a general election. And in front of them are politicians. John Nicolson, a former BBC journalist to trade, is the SNP MP for Oakhill in South Perthshire and the SNP's Shadow Culture Secretary. The former teacher, Michael Shanks, the Shadow Minister of State for Scotland, won the Rutherglen and Hamilton West by-election spectacularly from the SNP in October, making him one of two Labour MPs in Scotland. Craig Hoy is the chairman of the Scottish Conservatives and the MSP for the South of Scotland region and was, for many years, a journalist and businessman. The Liberal Democrat MP for North East Fife, Wendy Chamberlan, is our party's chief whip and spokesperson for work and pensions. She was a police officer for many years and also worked in business in the private sector. Patrick Harvey is the co-leader of the Scottish Green Party and has been the MSP for Glasgow region since 2003. He's the Minister for Zero Carbon Buildings. Before entering the Scottish Parliament, he worked in the area of sexual health. Now, Paisley faces lots of challenges and hurdles, so let's hear from our audience about some of them. Let's begin with you, Sharon Thomas. You are a secondary school teacher.
Yeah, thanks very much. I have a wee question to the panel here. Again, I work within higher education, but also within secondary education. I'm a member of EIS, which is the education union, who are a great union. Issues have come up with the questionnaires within teaching, and also I've come across this myself in the class. Was basically a rise in violence in the classroom. Violence, children with each other, but also violence against the teachers in the classrooms, which is we've taken on. Also, what we're coming across is actual seeing hunger in the classroom of children who are not eating. Essentially, what the question is, what are government doing wrong to cause such a sad state of affairs?
Well, of course, you know, education is a devolved issue like health, but both these issues are going to play a big part in the general election. You know, John Nicolson, the SNP has been in charge for a very long time. There's very many issues with education in Scotland, but those twin things of behaviour in the classroom and hunger are not entirely unrelated.
Well, actually, sadly, the microphone's gone. I was going to ask Sharon if she linked the hunger with the upsurge in violence.
Yeah.
And I see you're
and
nodding.
She nods, yeah.
I see you're nodding that you do. It's tragic that children are going to school hungry. It's a tragedy in a wealthy country like the United Kingdom, and if it's having a knock-on effect, as you say, on violence in the classroom,
but it's something
that's
that you're
really
in
terrible
charge
for
of
the teacher and terrible for the teachers and terrible for the pupils.
And you are in charge of that budget for education. But let me just come now and talk about health with Faye Udutayo, and you are a nurse at the Royal Alexandra Hospital in Paisley.
Hello. My name is Faye. I'm a mental health nurse from the Royal Alexandra Hospital in Paisley. And I'm going to say, in the last few years of staying in Paisley, I've seen a lot that has changed in the NHS. And that's why I'm up here tonight to ask the board. Looking at Scotland's safe starving generally, we have in place in the next couple of months or maybe next month the crisis of workforce, unsafe staffing, and how nurses has to keep working without support from the government. And briefly, if you could just tell me, with the new 3,000 RN recruitment coming up, what's the government going to do? What's the difference? What's going to make a difference out of the whole thing? And looking into mental health, there are a lot going on. People are not assessing mental health as necessary. What is the plan in changing
We're going
this?
to talk to our panel about that, but let's just take a question from Terry McTernan, a point from Terry McTernan, who's a community activist.
Yeah, good evening, panel. Against the backdrop of the current cost of living crisis and in light of the Trussonomics era, one industry that's certainly thriving in Renfrewshire is the poverty industry. And I wondered what the panel felt about the possibility of both Scotland's governments working in tandem to strategise and positively tackle poverty. At the moment, we seem to be living in a world where we have a Scottish government focused on tackling poverty and a pernicious Westminster government seeking to do everything it can to undermine that.
Well, let me just talk to Michael Shanks about this, because we know that Keir Starmer, for example, on child benefit, Keir Starmer says they are sticking to the cap on child benefit for 2 children. Now, that is not the situation for Anna Sawar, the leader of Labour in Scotland. You're a Labour MP at Westminster, but what do you make of that? Is it perfectly reasonable to have entirely different policy in Scotland than elsewhere?
Well, what we've said on the 2-child cap is that the whole of universal credit needs to be reviewed. So you can't just look at one part in isolation. One of the key things that is leading people to use food banks at the moment is the length of time people wait for the universal credit claim. So that needs to be reviewed as well. But the thing that links all 3 of these questions, if I can just do that, is the state of our public services at the moment, education and health. We've got 1 in 6 people in Scotland on an NHS waiting list. We've got, after 17 years
let's just stick to the 2. Let's just stick, because you talk about complete reform of universal benefit, right? But are we talking immediately about changing things, or are we going to see a situation if a Labour government comes in where families south of the border are going to have a cap on 2-child benefit? Or are we going to have a different situation in Scotland? Would you welcome a different situation in Scotland?
We don't have a different situation. The Scottish Parliament does have the powers to mitigate at the moment. They've chosen not to do that. So they could do it differently here. They've chosen not to, so it's the same across the whole of the UK. But I do think it's really important, the wider point here, is that in all of these cases, we need to be lifting people out of poverty. That's not just through the benefit system. So we've said very clearly in the first 100 days we'll have a new deal for working people. That's about putting money back into people's pockets, about making work pay, taking away the precariousness of work at the moment, which is driving people into poverty. And the thing that links these questions is that our public services at the moment are creaking. We've had 17 years of the SNP, 17 years since they said education would be the number one priority.
Keir Starmer or Anna Sawar out of interest?
Well,
which do you support? Because they've got very, as Kirsty says, they've got very different policies. In the by-election, you supported your Scottish leader, and down at Westminster, you seem to support Keir Starmer, and there's a gulf between the two positions.
Do you know what's so interesting about this is that actually I wonder if anybody really cares about these questions, John, because what people really care about, genuinely what I think people care about, is these really complex issues.
Do you care about these questions?
They care about these questions?
Okay, let me come to Craig Hoy. After 14 years of a Conservative government, poverty, according to this gentleman, poverty is still something that afflicts places like Paisley, which was a centre of manufacturing, a centre of excellence. It now has new industries, but poverty is still central in this town. Is that acceptable?
I don't think poverty anywhere in Scotland is acceptable, and I think one of the critical things in the question was why can't both of our governments work together to try and solve it? And I think, sadly, part of the discourse in Scottish politics is now all about division. It's talking about independence versus the Union. How about talking about the UK government and the Scottish government working cohesively and coherently to tackle poverty? Think about Kirsty.
So let's just be quite clear.
Just think about during the pandemic.
Would a returning Conservative government work with whatever government was in Scotland cohesively and friendly?
Well, we've wanted to do that. You referred to levelling up.
Patrick Harvey,
and we're seeking to do that. And it's Patrick Patrick and the SNP government who want to sow division rather than have our two governments working together.
That's simply the opposite of what the reality is. Look, so many of these issues, we can all collectively choose to drag them down to the base level of the worst that party politics is, or we can decide over the next few months ahead, as we get closer to the election, to try and raise these issues up. And the opportunity that we have for a change of direction at UK-wide level, you know, whether in Scotland, where the SNP and the Greens are in government, whether down south where the Tories are in government, whether in Wales, where Labour's in government, all of our public services are under severe stress. And it takes investment on a scale that we haven't seen before. I fear that that's not only not coming from the Tory government, I fear that it's not going to come from a Labour government either.
Stand on that? Because, you know, there is a problem because, you know, if you were in a position at the general election where you had to form some kind of coalition, would you refuse to form a coalition with the Conservatives? Would you refuse to form a coalition with Labour in the general election?
The reality, Kirsty, is we're just focused on winning as many seats as we possibly can come the election, and I don't think you would expect me to say anything different. But I would say that on the two-child cap and the two-child and the benefit cap, you know, the Liberal Democrats have said that we would remove both of those because what we are seeing is they are artificially putting too many people into poverty. And in relation to what Patrick said about working collectively, I mean, my understanding is from a Scottish Parliament's perspective, all parties are supportive of the Scottish child payment, and that has been a transformative thing.
I want now to...
May I answer that because the woman in the front row I felt was a little bit shortchanged earlier on in terms of the answers that she got. I mean, in Paisley, party politics matters, debate matters, healthy, respectful debate matters. 10,000 children in Paisley alone have been lifted out of poverty because of the Scottish child payment. Yeah. And my colleagues, Conservative and Labour colleagues, don't support that. And it is it's a dramatic policy to eradicate poverty, and it's been called life-changing by many of the children's charities.
Now, I want to take a question which is related to education from Andrew Malcolm, but it's also about business, but it's about the future and what happens to you as a big business. First of all, when you look around Paisley, what do you see in terms of poverty and education?
Well, good evening, panel. Yeah, we're a privately owned, family-run business that was established over 100 years ago, born and bred in Renfrewshire. We pride ourselves in having 2,000 colleagues across the UK. Our approach to life is today's apprentices are tomorrow's colleagues and leaders, and it's imperative we put money back into that. My biggest issue as a business in the local area especially is how you can actually get into the apprenticeship levy. We as a company unfortunately fall into the threshold where we pay well over £300,000 a year into the apprenticeship levy, which I clear as apprenticeship tax. We cannot access any more than about 100,000 of that to back into our own employees.
So are you saying that if you could access it, that actually you would be employing a lot more apprentices and giving a lot more work in Paisley?
We have always had an apprenticeship programme in place. Even during COVID, we did not stop that, because the day you stop it, it's very hard to get started. Our biggest issue is that if you take out 2,000 employees, over 700 of them are drivers, and normally they're mature individuals, not youngsters. So again, trying to access the money, and we've got a very ageing population, plus a shortage of skilled drivers. So really, we would see this should be more of a skills levy, the apprenticeship levy, where we could actually get into that would service the wider population.
Well, I'm going to come again to another question about what's happening in the local area with education. But what about that actually there's a problem with the way that business red tape stops apprentices being taken on and stops them carrying on with their apprenticeship when they're a little older?
Well, if that is the case, then that's something we need to resolve. I was in Scottish Borders College on Friday last week and talking to young apprentices, and it's quite clear that that is the future. But this year, for example, Scotland's colleges are facing an acute cash shortfall. Skills Development Scotland is seeing its budget cut by £4 million. The future, you know, we're going to have to skill and reskill right throughout our lives because of the changing nature of the economy in which we live. And that's why cutting, for example, tertiary and secondary education and cutting the funding available to our colleges makes absolutely no sense. On the detail of the red tape, I'll happily speak to you afterwards and see what we can do in relation to that.
Well, let's just talk a little bit more about education before I want to come on to take comments from cost of living. Where do you see the problems, David Smart? You're a consultant. Your father your late father was the provost here. Where is it lack of ambition? Is it lack of education opportunities? Is it lack of business opportunities?
I think, unsurprisingly, I would say it's a combination of them all that are there. The first thing I would say is I think there's some very positive things happening in Paisley and the wider Renfrewshire area, and there is some data to be quite encouraged by. But if we come to employability, and then it links to some of the mentions of challenges of businesses, you look at the statistics for Paisley, Renfrewshire and anywhere else, the big issue is the number of people who are economically inactive. And that is very heavily people who have health-related issues that are preventing their access to employment. And if we have, I think, in many ways quite a positive business outlook, there's exciting developments, none more than this building we're in tonight. We need to unlock that group of the labour market and get them into employment if we can.
Let me just ask, anyone else wants to talk about this idea of getting people into employment and the problems about getting people into employment? Yes, can I have a microphone here to the lady in pink? There we are. Thank you. Your name, please.
Thank you. I'm Donna from Squared Insurance Brokers, and I see the same issue. I'm in financial services. We've got an ageing workforce. People are hitting retirement, and there's a lot of knowledge leaving. And for me, what support is there going to be as an employer to bring in new people, not restricted to age, to upskill them, to take them through their exams? And as an employer, where's the support for us?
So your feeling is that in this area, and we'll take this gentleman at the back here, but your feeling in this area particularly, but there isn't a proper investment in industry strategy? Yes,
and the funding to go along with it.
Well, let me just take the gentleman at the back there with your hand up. Yes, can I have your question? You've got the microphone.
Jim Sinclair, I'm a responsible person for the MHRA. And I've now lost my place.
Are we talking about business, industry, employability?
I think we've lost the place when it comes to encouraging people to go to university and nothing else. To get people to work, we need them with a broad spectrum, not just going to university. They're going to university and they're doing degrees that are no good to them to get them a job when they come out.
And that's Kirsty, why it is deeply regrettable that the Scottish Government are cutting college budgets right across Scotland, because they are an important part of the future of our economy. Yeah, further education colleges.
Yeah, but also, does Scotland have anything like the same apprenticeship strategy they've got in Germany, for example, which is a much more embedded system in Germany?
Well, we published last year a paper called Grasping the Thistle, where we looked at how we could rejuvenate the Scottish economy. And what we talked about were individual learning accounts that people could tap into all the way through their career, and also a digital college for Scotland, because don't forget, many of the people that we're talking about live in rural areas and cannot access their nearby college. So we need to think more widely about that.
Scotland's got one of the highest percentages of tertiary education in the whole of Europe, which is something to be proud of. And as you know, you don't have to pay tuition fees in Scotland, which is very different south of the border. You can rack up tens of thousands in debt. You don't have that in Scotland because the SNP government abolished that. Kirsty, as the first generation
but there's lots of hang on, there's lots of children in Scotland that can't get to university because you need to bring in finance from elsewhere.
I was going to develop that. As the first generation of my family to go to university, that changed my life. But as the gentleman there said, there are other ways to advance your education, and apprenticeships are immensely important.
But that is the problem.
So one of the problems, of course, is that for a lot of people, if they're offered a choice between a relatively high-paying job or an apprenticeship, it's tempting to go for the job rather than the apprenticeship. They've got to be made to pay. And in a town like Paisley, which you just walk around Paisley and see the skills that built this amazing town, it's vastly important that we skill up.
Well, let's look specifically at what's happening in Paisley and other towns on the cost of living crisis. Is there one thing the government could do to make a difference? Tell me what your lives are like in Paisley. Tell me about how the cost of living affects you. Can I have a question? The gentleman with the tartan shirt on,
I go back to the point you're talking about, bring people out of poverty. What the gentleman's earlier seen is correct. See if you want to bring people out of poverty, create employment. Don't have people in benefits all their lives. 4 in 10 working adults do not work in Scotland. They're not looking for work. How can we sustain that? Who's going to pay the taxes?
Yes, can I just take the gentleman over here? I'm going to get a mic to you as soon as I can, just coming from the back row. And then we've got another lady with a question here. Yes, your question.
Hi, my name's James. I'm a 4th-year politics student at the University of Strathclyde. In relation to employability, I was the generation that left after COVID, right? We left school at the end of S6 and we just got basically not abandoned, but abandoned. We have no employability skills. We have no life skills. I couldn't tell you how to gain a mortgage, but I could tell you useless things like Pythagoras' theorem, and the government doesn't help us in gaining those skills.
So you would like business skills as well?
I would like business skills. And in relation to the cost of living crisis as well, the train fares reduction, the off-peak all-day train fare trial, amazing. That has helped us a lot. But there should be more done to help students, unemployed people get into these schemes and out into the world.
And just in terms of, we trumpet the fact that there are no tuition fees in Scotland, but also a lot of Scottish school leavers can't get into Scottish universities because of the international students who bring money in.
I went down a different road, so I did 2 years at college and went straight into third year at university, which I'm grateful for the opportunity to do so. But there is a lot of barriers and there's a lot of unknowns surrounding the university system, so it needs to be looked at, reviewed and understood better.
Let's have a comment from the gentleman in green. Do say who you are about the cost of living crisis. Oh, I thought you had the microphone. Let's make sure we get that microphone to the gentleman at the back first. Thanks very much indeed. And then we're going to come to the woman in the centre of the Kirk. Yes.
Hello there. I'm Gordon Clark. I work for people with autism, and I'm here to champion their cause. The cost of living has really affected them. They seem to be the forgotten group of people in society. We all talk about everything's important, but your society is only as good as the way you treat the people that are less, unfortunately, not get the same support as everybody else should. So I've seen parents that are got their children, their young adults, till they're in their 70s, until the local authority decides to actually give them a decent home.
So, Scotland supposedly prides itself on being very egalitarian, but do you think there is a big divide with people who need more help, different help? And
people with autism, the local authorities only wait until they really need to get them houses.
And do you think that's to do with budget?
I think it's to do with budget, and I still think that they're the forgotten few in society, and it's about time we actually treated them correctly.
Right, we have a lot of hands up, and I want to get to as many of you as possible. I'm going to come back to you as well. Can I have the woman in the middle there who had the microphone originally? Let's get your perspective, because I think actually you're a business owner.
Hi there, I'm Jill Frew. I'm an independent retailer in Glasgow city centre. We're one of the very few retailers that actually pay the living wage through the Living Wage Foundation. But how can we, as a retailer, continue to pay that when we have the LEZ and we now have the parking restrictions in Glasgow to 10 o'clock at night? How can we reward our employees when we've got all these barriers put in place by the SNP and the Greens in Glasgow city centre?
Well, there you have. That's exactly in your territory, Patrick Harvey. Before I go around the audience a bit more, in fact, what happens is that small retailers are really struggling, and there is a cost of living crisis. Spend is down, but their costs are up.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do need to be supporting not just existing uses of our towns and centres, businesses that are based there, but supporting others to come in and take up spaces that have been left empty by others. I don't think the way to do that is to continue with poor environmental standards like the chronic air pollution problems Glasgow's had for decades. We do need to fix that. Actually, if we invest in making the environment in our towns and cities more attractive, more healthy, more people will want to spend time there. I think that's a win-win, actually, for the vibrancy of our towns and for the environment and the health of people in our towns and cities.
Well, I want to take some more questions, but first of all, can I just ask you, hands up, if you feel better off since the last general election? Right, OK. I think that's pretty decisive. Can I have your question, please, or your comment? Thank you.
Jonathan Kelly, I work in corporate banking. One of the questions I'd like to ask the panel...
And you're not better off?
Absolutely not, no, I can assure you, absolutely not. One of the things that I think all the parties are deliberately very quiet on is Brexit. And I don't hear anything from any party about potentially a U-turn, customs union, single union, about actually turning back the clock, because polling shows that the majority of people realise it's been an absolute disaster. And I cannot understand why politicians...
Of course... Paisley,
Politicians should be brave, admit there's been a mistake and how they would remedy it. And I think both the main political parties at Westminster, Conservatives and Labour, are very, very quiet in this, and I think it's shocking.
OK, well, you can't be quiet forever on this. Craig Hoy, you're hearing from a corporate banker there who says that this has been a massive problem. And indeed, for businesses, getting supplies, getting for example, logistics. It's created a lot of problems for people. Do you accept that?
I would accept that there's been quite a lot of tumult in the business and operating environment and problems over the last 3 years. Which of those relate directly to Brexit and which of those relate to the COVID pandemic is not entirely sure. But to make that point, the UK, the
GDP.
Hang on, let me just pick up, because I don't think the microphone picked up. The gentleman there says that Goldman Sachs found that it affected
5% reduction in GDP. That also impinges upon the cost of living crisis. That compounds the problem. UK households are worse off because of Brexit.
Yeah. Well, let me just pick up. Bring the microphone to the front here, please, just because on that question I want to come back to the panel, but a quick comment.
Yeah, I entirely agree with the point about Brexit. And perhaps Craig can cite to the benefits Brexit's brought.
Well, look, I think one of the benefits was during COVID, the fact that we managed to acquire and develop so much of the vaccine and roll it out here in the United Kingdom.
That's not true.
That is true. We've been part of the EU programme. The UK innovated. It was the best of British science innovation that we developed the vaccine. It was the best of British trade and diplomacy that we acquired so much, not just for ourselves, but for the developing world.
European
and it was
Union
the best of British science, best of British logistics, John,
as we did.
Best of British logistics and our NHS that meant that we rolled that out.
Sorry, because I've still got the microphone. I think that is a dubious claim that's been seriously challenged. Can you give us another one?
Well, I think, for example, we're now joining the Trans-Pacific Partnership, looking at rapidly growing markets in the Asia-Pacific region and Latin America, which we can now export to.
But you just
I was talking. Well, actually, you want to pull out the biggest market on the doorstep, which is the rest of the UK, Patrick. That is an opportunity that we can seize to export to global markets, and it's something that the UK government,
this is very interesting for a town like Paisley to conjure with, because Paisley, of course, has always looked outwards in the world because of its huge industry in the Industrial Revolution. So can we just get a sense of how people feel about that? Now, the woman here in blue, you had your hand up. Let me just check what you would like to say. We're going to get a microphone to you just as quickly as we can. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name's Marie. I'm a civil servant and I'm also a local activist. It's just to Mr Hoy, when you said about Brexit being a benefit to us because of the vaccine, what about the obscene amount of money that these companies are making now as a result of COVID and afterwards? The money is going to them. It's not going back into the taxpayers' coffers.
Well, I think fundamentally we looked to cooperate with the private sector. The UK government worked with the private sector to develop that vaccine, and that vaccine went all around the world. So that was something that we achieved here in the United Kingdom, to develop the vaccine that helped out many, many parts of the world, including the
let me just bring in Wendy Chamberlan, please.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's interesting Craig saying that when he's talking about the CTPPP, when I know farmers in my constituency who can't get staff to pick fruit and vegetables in the fields, who are finding themselves clobbered by the trade deals that the UK government has managed and not seeing any benefit to it at all. And actually, a number of the topics that have been picked up this evening, NHS, staffing issues, wage requirements, education where there's shortages across the piece. And I think the problem is that we've ended up with a Brexit that's been a slow puncture in some respects, and as a result it's been covered up by other things. But you know, I find it interesting that nobody thinks in Parliament that actually Brexit is going well. Even the Brexiteers think that it's not going well.
Hang on. Before we actually just leave Brexit, let's just see what change would a Labour government make to a Brexit settlement?
Well, fundamentally, it's about resetting the relationships with
Europe.
What
does that mean?
Well, it means on things like, for example,
Customs
we've been talking
Union?
around. Could you just? Because the point about Brexit is that, of course, we were led into it by a Conservative Party in absolute chaos, and the difference is. It's difficult to separate out the economic chaos of the Conservative Party from Brexit. We've had 14 years of this. The bit that Craig conveniently misses out when he talks about the last few years is Liz Truss's catastrophic budget, which almost crashed the economy. So the difference. So what we would say is,
Ukraine also had a role to play.
So there's been a number of factors. The difference is we have right on our borders a really important trading partner. We need to rebuild those relationships in a serious way.
Right.
We've not had that.
Kirsty, can I say something about Brexit? Because I haven't said anything about Brexit, and the Scottish National Party has consistently opposed Brexit. Now, I agree with everything Wendy said, except, of course, remember that her leader said we are not a rejoin party. So the Lib Dems aren't in favour of it. We know that Craig's party is responsible for Brexit, and the Labour Party and the Labour Party is not in favour of rejoining either.
Right. Let's move on now to one definite UK-wide issue, which is a particular resonance in this area. Defence accounts for 2.2% of the UK spend. Of course, we are 30 miles here from Paisley, which houses the UK's nuclear deterrent. Grant Shapps said, the Defence Secretary, the world has entered a pre-war period. Adversaries, Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, we're facing unprecedented threat. During the Cold War, we were dealing with rational actors. These powers are more unstable. So therefore, what I want to ask you, because this will be an issue in the general election, is hands up those of you who wish to be rid of nuclear weapons. About half. Let me just check who wants to keep our nuclear weapons. A little bit about half of that. Where do we stand now, Patrick Harvey, in this country on nuclear weapons as far as the Green Party is concerned?
Well, the Green Parties, plural, of the UK are profoundly anti-nuclear, but it's not only Greens who take that position. I grew up pretty close to Paisley, and in the years of the Cold War, you know, I was far from alone in having nightmares about nuclear annihilation. I have never believed that the threat of nuclear annihilation makes the world safer. I think it makes the world much, much more dangerous. And that's even just in Cold War terms. In today's terms, what are the real threats to human security around the world? They are around things like cyber and state terrorism. They are around things like food security, climate security. These are the profound threats to human security in the world. Nuclear weapons do nothing to protect us or the rest of the world collectively from that. And what we need is to be investing the kind of gargantuan sums that go into these weapons of mass destruction into the real solutions to issues like climate security, food security, and the equitable distribution of human rights around the world. That's never been more obvious than when we see in our screens people suffering the appalling inequities of violence being inflicted upon them on a mass scale in terms of the collective punishment of people in places like Gaza.
Shanks, from your point of view, would a Labour government up defence spending as 2.2%, and where do you stand on rearming the nuclear arsenal?
Well, the Labour Party supports the nuclear deterrent, so absolutely we will support the next generation of Trident. Because it is an important part of our arsenal, it's an important part of defending. And when you look at, we've got conflict in Europe for the first time since the Second World War, and nuclear power invading a country in Eastern Europe, it's incredibly important that we have that arsenal. But the other side is to not lose sight of the rest of defence spending, where our armed forces have been deteriorating for years under the Conservative Party. There's also huge amounts of waste in the MOD, which is what I was going to come to. A study just a few months ago found nearly 15 billion had been wasted in the Ministry of Defence since 2010. 15 billion is serious amounts of money that could be put into manufacturing and jobs and apprenticeships as well.
So we've got hands up in the audience here right beside each other. So take the microphone first and you have your comment, and then hand it to the gentleman in front of you, please.
My name is Jim Clark-Dick. Nobody in their right mind wants nuclear weapons, but we need them. They're a deterrent. That is the thing we need. There's been no world war since 1945. I'd like it to remain like that. I'm lucky. I'm a generation. I'm 73 now. I've never had to fight. I haven't been called up, and that's because we've got a deterrent. I would have. If anything happens to the country, I would still go today. But thankfully, I don't have to. And we don't spend all our budget for nuclear weapons. It goes in other things. We've got a navy, which is depleted. We've got an army, we can hardly get people to join. So we've got a lot of trouble. We cannot just leave. Why did Sweden and Finland join NATO quickly?
Non-nuclear.
Why did they join NATO quickly?
Yeah. Give the microphone just a quick comment from you, and then the gentleman over here, please.
Hello, my name's Gordon Morris. What I would like to say
to Patrick is, how do you propose defending yourself if it did come to a nuclear war tomorrow? If you get rid of the trident and things like that.
There is no way to defend yourself in a nuclear war. Nuclear war is about mass destruction. There is no defence against it. And I cannot accept the idea that it's about deterrence. If the principle of nuclear deterrence worked, the world would have seen 45 years of peace.
Right, let's have a quick comment from the gentleman in the fair owl sweater.
In all of that
gentleman in the fair owl sweater.
I think nuclear is a necessary evil. One would hope that it would never be used. However, is it the most appropriate to have it in Scotland, given that the majority of people in Scotland don't necessarily believe that it should be here? And to go back on your point...
Leslie, hands up for that. It's a necessary evil, but should it be in Scotland, given the majority in Scotland don't want it? What's the answer? Should it be in Scotland? No, it should be in Scotland. Well, with that, let's come to another hands up now. How many of you who were totally sure how they would vote at the last general election are sure now? How many of you are sure? Sure, you're sure. So I would say that's about a third. And I wonder who is not sure and why are you not sure? OK, well, let's take this gentleman here with the blue jacket on, if we can just get this microphone along to you, and then someone at that side as well. Why are you not sure?
It's the animosity in politics at the moment, and the lies. I mean, like, the only way, you know, if they're telling the truth is if their mouth's moving, you know what I mean? Like, they don't tell the truth. Sorry, telling lies is their mouth moving. It's ridiculous, and I mean, like our Prime Minister has been pulled up numerous times for mistelling stuff. PM's question time. You had Boris Johnson before him, who, you know, it's just, you can't trust a politician.
You can't trust a politician. Let's have a comment from over here about that. We've got a microphone over here about trusting politicians. Yes.
Hello, yes. My name's Patricia. I'm still undecided, and mainly because there is nothing anyone in this panel has said that makes me think I want to vote for either of them.
All right, let's get some more comments on this. And I wonder if you think, and yes, I'll take you first in the front row, but Fee has got a microphone coming to her. Yeah, and what is it about politics that makes you uncertain?
Well, for me, because I'm an internally recruited nurse, I know I could vote locally, but general election, I'm not sure what the law says. And the union has been speaking up concerning this, making sure all internally recruited nurses are part of the general election, because whatever decision is being made for nursing profession or nurses generally, we are part of it.
And do you know for sure how you would vote? Are you still undecided?
I'm still undecided.
Tell me about the toxicity in the debate, how it affects you. We've just heard from that gentleman there. There's a microphone here. Let's hear from the person with the microphone first. Yes, on this side.
Hi, my name's Ian. I'm a finance director, and I think the toxicity in politics right now is the worst I've ever seen it in my lifetime. I'm sure it's probably the worst it's ever been in many people's lifetimes in this room. It's interesting that we talk about, for example, the perception of the UK in terms of Europe. We have public services that are on their knees. Part of that could be the fact that people on the continent don't see us as a particularly welcoming country, whether that's through Brexit or the fact that we have a UK government who can't even acknowledge that they have a problem with Islamophobia because they can't even say the word. Yeah. And it's interesting that they are asking us to put our trust in them to vote, but actually, where is the trust from them in us?
Thank you very much. A quick comment from this gentleman over here in the blue shirt who's got the microphone here.
Hi, I'm Philip. I'm from the Jewish community, and it really follows directly on. We've got increasing racism across the country, and it appears to be fuelled by politicians, including MPs on both the extreme left and the extreme right. How can we address this?
Thank you very much indeed. Let me come to you, Wendy, first. Do you think politicians are acting in a way that is deserving of people's votes at the moment?
I certainly think that, you know, when I came into politics, and I think it's interesting, one, I'm the only woman on this panel, but two, all of us had jobs before politics. And I know lots of people talk about the fact that there's politicians that don't have that. But, you know, I certainly feel as a woman, would I encourage other women to get involved in politics? And I also think that I've come into politics assuming that the majority of MPs are the same as me, that they got involved in activism, they got involved in politics because they wanted to make a difference in the communities they represent. And I think when we see people using language, either of the extreme left or extreme right, it means that it just brings the whole discourse down and it legitimises abuse of us as politicians, but also generally within the public and the wider sphere.
Michael Shanks, does it concern you that people in this room simply do not have trust in politicians and believe that the debate is toxic?
I think it's extremely concerning. It should be alarming to all of us because our democracy only functions if everybody feels like they can participate in that democracy. And if you're saying that actually you feel like politics isn't in a place that can change your lives, that's really, really worrying for all of us. And of course, what that does is it creates a space where more extreme elements can come into our democracy, which is not good. I do think we were talking about this earlier on, that actually we all do agree on quite a lot, and you might not see that tonight, but the real politics that goes on often isn't the Prime Minister's questions, shouting match. It often is thoughtful committees, discussions, exchanges of ideas. That's the bit of politics we probably need to show a lot more of so that you actually do see where we come from. But I do think there's something really important about this election where there is a chance to turn the corner on 14 years of what has been a very divisive government and the chance to vote for change. But we do need to have people contributing to that in a democracy, going out and voting for it and being part of that change.
Very quickly, just before we get in, do people in here feel that politics is capable of change? Some of you do, some of you do, but a lot of you don't. Well, let's try and sort that out before the general election. That's just about it from Newsnight tonight, from here at the National Manufacturing Institute in Scotland and the University of Strathclyde. Thanks to our politicians and invited guests who've made the conversation sparkle here in Paisley.